I'm going to talk a little bit about propofol wastage because the topic is clean, sustainable anesthesia. As I showed you in my first slide, propofol is one of the very largest amount of drug which is used and wasted as well as in our OR setting. So this study was actually done in one of the hospitals. They basically started collecting all the drugs from the trash bins in the 8 operating rooms for almost a year, and they wanted to compare with the amount of drug dispensed and the amount of drug wasted. So there was no surprise. Propofol was the most widely dispensed drug as well as the wasted drugs in terms of volume, around 32%. Other drugs were around 48% for ephedrine, and if you can look around for succinylcholine also, it was around 41%. Now, any drug you drop in the syringe, if you don't use it, it is eventually going to go back into the environment, and you can either trash it in the water or you can put it in the landfill. Eventually it will reach the environment and it has environmental consequences. So we do something called a PBT score, which is basically stands for persistence, bioaccumulation and toxicity score, and propofol score is around 6 out of 9. It is not biodegradable. It is absorbed into the adipose tissues of aquatic animals, and the only way to destroy this drug is to burn it out. So bottom line is, it has environmental consequences. Simply by removing 50 cc and 100 cc vials from their formulary, they replaced it with 20 cc vials. They were able to reduce their wastage by almost 90%. Cincinnati Hospital actually uses one of these graphs. So this is a chart shows how much propofol you need. So if you're using at 250 cc's mic per kg per minute, and if you look at on the left hand side is the weight and on the right hand side is the time for which you have to use the drug. The red line is the 50 ml threshold. So you can easily calculate, how much drug do you need. I mean, I've seen it many times, residents or even ourselves, we are loading up the whole 50 cc syringe for a 30-minute case or a 40-minute case, and obviously none of that is completely used. But these calculations are based on 250 cc's mic per kg per minute. We hardly use such a high dose. We probably use somewhere around 125 to 150, so we can actually reduce these numbers by half and can reduce the amount of wastage in propofol. Now this study was done to compare the greenhouse gas emissions of inhalation anesthetic gases with propofol. How does propofol fare in all these things? So the functional unit was 1 MAC for 1 hour on a 70 kilogram patient with 1 MAC equivalent, which is 100 mics per kg per hour for the patient. As you can see, that propofol is completely metabolized, so it actually has no greenhouse gas effect. The only greenhouse gas effects from propofol actually comes from using the pump. That's what using the electricity and contributing to global warming. So again, in the study, they basically did a cradle to grave approach, right from resource extraction, manufacturing of the drug, transportation of the drug to consumption and eventually emission into the environment. Desflurane has the highest amount of impact as compared to all other agents, and the propofol impact was almost 4 orders of magnitude less as compared to any of the other inhalation anesthetic gases. So techniques like IV anesthetics, neuraxial, peripheral nerve blocks are actually the most climatic friendly strategies in anesthesia because they have 0 bad side effects from the environmental or climate point of view. Now I'm going to switch gears again. We'll talk about some alternative strategies. Xenon is one of the things which has been talked about quite often. So it is a natural occurring gas. It is obtained by fractional distillation of liquefied air. It has actually no greenhouse gas effects, no effect on ozone, so all great qualities. It has a MAC of around 71%. It is also analgesic. It's almost like an inhalational ketamine. It is actually 1.5 times more potent than nitrous oxide, acts on NMDA receptors. It is extremely cardiac stable. All great qualities. It does not act on the calcium channel blockers, but it is expensive. It costs around $10 per liter. In order for you to run an anesthetic with Xenon for 4 hours, it costs around $170 as compared to if you want to use nitrous with desflurane or isoflurane for 4 hours, where it costs around $70 to $80. So one of the factors is it's expensive. 80% of that is produced in Russia. We know that Russia meddled in our elections. Probably we won't get it that often. There were randomized trials, 43 of them done to compare xenon with inhalational anesthetic gases, and 12 of them comparing xenon with propofol. They found that xenon actually caused lower heart rate and higher MAP, all great qualities. The emergence was faster. Unfortunately, it has a higher incidence of post-op nausea if you compare it with inhalational anesthetic gases. So the big question is, does it actually improve outcome? Do you justify using a drug which is way more expensive and not to produce to use it? What we really need is randomized controlled trials or prospective studies to make that argument. So till we have that answer, I'm not sure when it will be coming into the market for us to use it. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is anesthesia gastric elimination. This is basically a strategy. If all the drugs which we are using or inhalational anesthetic gases we are using are eventually exited out into the environment, what if we can collect all the gases before they are exited out into the atmosphere, purify them, extract all the local inhalational anesthetic gases and use it back again? So that was the concept actually used by Dr. James Berry. He's an anesthesiologist at Vanderbilt Universities. They actually designed two products. One called as dynamic gas scavenging system, and the other was anesthesia gas reclamation system. So normal anesthesia machines contain or carry active gas scavenging system called as AGSS, which actually uses a lot of energy because all your anesthetic pipelines are connected to the vacuum pump that is operated by electricity. So the cost of electricity is significant. It has to run 24/7, and basically they enter in almost 37 liters of air and they dilute all the anesthetic gases before they are exited out into the environment. If you replace these with dynamic gas scavenging system, which only works when patient is taking a breath or when the patient is connected to the ventilator, you can significantly reduce the pump time by almost half. And eventually, so the electricity costs, there is a significant savings on electricity cost. And all the anesthetic gases can actually be condensed and liquefied and collected in an anesthetic gas reclamation unit and can be used again. This product is FDA approved. They did the first pilot study in Vanderbilt, and it is currently not available for large-scale production, but that's how you can use all the anesthetic and you can recover more than 98 to 99% of the anesthetic in its actual form without altering the structure and use it in for similar repeated purposes. By doing that, they ran a study on 65 operating rooms. They were able to generate a saving on electricity, just electricity, by around $28,000. And as you can see, when you're using such a high gas flows, they are diluting all the anesthetic gases. So the sevoflurane concentration, when it's exited, is around 0.1%. But if you replace that with a DGS system, since you are using very low fresh gas flows of around 2 or 5 liters, you can concentrate the sevoflurane and you can collect almost 1.9% of sevoflurane for use. I'll talk very briefly about Anaconda filters. These are anesthesia conserving devices used in the ICU settings. They are like a modified HME devices, like a heat moisture exchanger. It is used to provide volatile anesthetic sedation in the ICU setting. So anesthetic gases are given through a syringe to the patient, and what it contains is an evaporator rod which is able to absorb all the inhalational anesthetic gases, and it can be given back to the patient. So you decrease the consumption of anesthetic gases, but unfortunately these devices increase the work of breathing and also increase the airway space, dead airway space. So the only way to treat that is by increasing the tidal volumes or minute ventilation. So it's currently not used in pediatric settings or patients with head injuries or patients with requiring lung protective ventilation with low tidal volumes. There are also something called blue zone technologies that are also used. They basically have a canister-like device. This technology is patented from Ontario, Canada. What they do is they basically connect a canister into the scavenging system. They collect all the anesthetic gases. They disconnect that canister at the end of the case, take it to the lab, and then they can extract all the local inhalation anesthetic gases, and which can be reprocessed and used in veterinary medicine. Currently, around 25% of Canada hospitals are using one of these technologies. There is a technology used in Sweden called HVAC destruction, where they use a centralized heated catalyst system which can actually destroy nitrous. So all these agents can be, you can disconnect and collect and absorb all these anesthetic gases. They can be warehoused and eventually reprocessed. The second last segment of my talk is about using single-use devices or reusable devices. So the whole argument for using single-use devices is based on two factors. It is cheaper and obviously a low risk of contamination. But what has not been taken into account is the environmental risk by using these devices in a massive scale. So as you can see from the graph, the risk of infection actually goes down if the turnover of the inventory or using single-use devices keep on going up and up. But the indirect cost of indirect disease burden keep on going up because of the environmental cost, thus eventually leading to diminishing returns. So they did a life cycle analysis of laryngoscope handles. So the unique part about laryngoscope handles is the blades are considered as semi-critical devices that really requires higher level of disinfection because they obviously come in contact with mucous membranes. Traditionally, the handles are considered as non-critical devices that doesn't need high level of disinfection. They can simply be cleaned by wipes. But all the hospitals are basically either reprimanded by the Joint Commission because of infection risks. So the hospitals or institutions started investing more and more in using single-use devices and replacing them by, they were replaced by the reusable devices. ASA, there is a lack of consensus whether you should treat handles and blades separately. They treat both the entities as only one entity, and therefore a lot of institutions have started either using single-use devices or they are autoclaving handles as well, just like they are autoclaving blades. So if you look at the greenhouse gas effects for single-use devices, they are actually 15 to 25 times higher than the reusable devices. For blades, the greenhouse gas effects are actually 6 to 8 times higher. Even in terms of cost, the reusable handles are actually cheaper, 5 to 18 times cheaper, and the blades are 2 to 7 times cheaper. So the whole argument that it is cheaper, obviously in one unit is cheaper, but in the long run, reusable things actually makes better sense. Another study was done to compare the life cycle assessment of disposable and reusable LMAs. So the functional unit of comparison was using a classic LMA 40 times. That's traditionally all these LMAs are used typically, and comparing it with disposable LMAs on 40 different patients, unique LMAs. There are few stark features of difference between these two types of LMAs. Disposable LMAs are made up of PVCs, and they are also containing something called DEHP, which is a plasticizer to impart flexibility to the LMA, and it has carcinogenic potential. On the other hand, the reusable LMAs are made up of silicone. Another fact is disposable LMAs are produced in China, and the reusable LMAs are produced in Singapore. So you have to think about it. They are produced over there, they are shipped to United States, and they basically come to LA, and from LA they are transported to different hospitals. So we will have to, in order to compare the greenhouse gas effect, we will have to go beyond the price tag. The classic LMA costs around $200. So if you are using it 40 times, the average cost is around $5 per use, and the disposable LMAs cost around $9.60 in this study. Now, if you compare the life cycle assessment and the greenhouse gas effects, the greenhouse gas emissions from disposable LMAs was 50% higher, 11.3 carbon dioxide equivalent as compared to 7.4. If you transport these LMAs, disposable ones, since you'll be using very frequently by air, the greenhouse gas emissions even goes up by 81%. When you use the reusable LMA 10 times, their carbon dioxide equivalence factors increases by 54%. So around 11.4 kgs carbon dioxide equivalent. So At that point, we are at break-even point from carbon footprint as compared to disposable LMAs. So if you use a reusable LMA 10 times, the amount of carbon footprint you have will be similar to using one single-use devices. And in this study, they use that LMA 40 times. That's typically what a reusable LMA is used for. And therefore, you start getting profit, I guess, from the carbon footprint point of view. If you compare reusable LMA with disposable LMAs, on all factors, global warming, cancer, pollutants, ecotoxicity, smog, reusable LMAs are much better than disposable LMAs. These are our costs. LMA unique costs around $6 at Stanford, disposable handles around $7, and these are our fiber optic handles. Now I can understand the argument here is, because if you lose these MAC handles, definitely they are way more expensive, especially if you are going on a code or something like that. But since you can use these more frequently, overall their impact, they will come out to be cheaper, and also they have a much better carbon footprint. These are some of the studies I'm going to show. This is the last segment of my talk about show me the money. So in Wake Forest, they simply did an educational intervention. They taught their residents about the different type of anesthetic gases, and over the course of 7 years, they cut back on their desflurane use, increased their isoflurane use actually in this study, and they could generate a saving of $1.8 million, almost $1,000 per day. In one of the Australia hospitals, they simply replaced all their single-use devices with reusable devices. They could also generate a saving of almost like $500,000. But however, in Australia, their greenhouse gas emissions went up because the source of energy production in Australia is through coal, whereas in UK and USA, the source of energy production is natural gas. So the similar study, if done in US, will actually decrease the greenhouse gas effects and also will bring a lot of financial savings as well. Similar study done in UCSF, which shows efficient use of fresh gas flows. Obviously, by educating the residents, faculty, they were able to generate some cost decrease by using less and less of these agents. These are some of the stickers they have actually placed on their vaporizers. So every time you try to use them, you think about it, what should I be doing? And that also has helped in minimizing the use of desflurane. Similarly, in University of Wisconsin, they conducted a study, compared their results from 2011 to 15. They were able to reduce the use of desflurane by almost 15%. That led to 38% reduction in their carbon dioxide footprint. Almost 4 million kilograms of CO2 is released less. It's almost like 875 cars off the road for 1 year. Even at Hopkins, they were able to reduce the cost of inhalation anesthetic gases from $12,500 to $8,500, leading to a saving of around $225,000. These are some of the sustainability resources if you guys are interested in going through it. Simply by rearranging the sharp bins, what goes into the recycling, what goes into the landfill at Virginia Mason Hospital, they were able to reduce their amount of regulated medical waste.